Hetepu and Namaste. This is Kasank Ma'a Keparu coming to you with another broadcast. And today I want to talk to you about the Charlottesville protests, what happened there, and give you kind of a different perspective on the entire event. And also I'm going to give you some more deep information on ending racism or dealing with it. It's been with us for a long time, and we need to, as magi or magicians or God men and God women, we need to look at it from a really different view. And in fact, it brings to mind in the tarot deck the hangman, because the hangman, if you notice, he's hanging upside down, meaning that he has a very, very different perspective on the world. He's seeing things differently upside down. He's gaining a lot of insight and wisdom, and it's also a period of deep reflection and meditation. So let's take that in mind. But now let me preface what I'm about to say with this. I'm going to talk about something that's really into the occult alchemy. And if you are not ready to dive into this and really understand the underpinnings of how the world operates, if you're not ready for this or receptive, then none of this is going to make sense to you and you're going to reject it. All right. But for those of you who have an open mind and you're truth seekers, this is going to be like Ma'at Torah, because it's said in Egyptian mythology that Ma'at is the daughter of Ra. So Ma'at nourishes Ra. Truth nourishes your soul, your spirit. Ra is your energy, your chi energy, your kundalini. So, you know, this is going to be helpful, and it may bring everything into perspective to you. You may start to say, wow, that all makes sense now. So let's talk about Charlottesville, the protests, what happened there, Charlottesville, Virginia. So if you're not aware of it, there's a statue of General Robert Lee, who owned slaves. And that's going to be removed. The statue is going to be removed. So you had these gathering of white supremacists, you had KKK, neo-Nazi, skinheads, whatever, band together to go to Charlottesville, Virginia. I believe they started at the UVA, University of Virginia. And then they marched carrying these torches to what they call themselves white nationalists, to protect their history with General Lee. They didn't want the statue to be removed, but the statue it's going to be removed and sold off, I think. So they consider themselves true patriots and, you know, not white supremacists, you know, and President Trump kind of spoke about the situation, trying not to take sides. But how do you not take sides when you have, let me just be clear on this. I am all for freedom of speech, but freedom of speech when you have organizations that have demonstrated terrorist acts, who have demonstrated that they are out for the elimination of a whole, or genocide of a whole segment of people, that is not free speech. That is an abomination. It is against God. It's against Ma'at. When you start talking about eliminating a group of people, that is the highest offense. It's not an offense against humanity. It's an offense against God, because God created all things that have a place. They serve a function in the scheme of things. Removing any one part from the ecology, the ecosystem, damages the whole structure and collapses. So you are in violation of Ma'at, and at that point, Ma'at calls Haruku Huti to enforce justice and bring back the balance. But I digress. All right, so let's go into this whole thing about the white supremacists and racism. What we have to understand about racism now, that's what's going on, is that I don't have time to get into this, but racism is not what we perceive it to be. All right. Racism is a disguise for something more sinister going on. And I wrote a little book about this a long time ago that talked about the origin of racism, what really racism is about. It has nothing to do with color. It has nothing to do with race. It is a smokescreen for a more nefarious agenda. All right. But again, I don't have time to go into that. You'll have to, I'll cover that in a future video. But the way that we're looking at racism right now, it's very extreme. It's like, oh, racists are only white supremacists, you know, but actually racism is going on every day, and through things like microaggression, especially in corporate America. Now, the way that this is fostered and kept going from generation to generation, because it's been with us for a long time, is that there is a deflecting process where we're deflecting in it, and we're focusing on individuals as if, oh, if we can deal with this guy who said the N-word, or this guy who said kike, or he's against Jews, we can sufficiently end racism and anti-Semitism. But, you know, the real racism that exists within institutions, and it's a structural thing. And it's in, you know, it's part and parcel of economics. So if you can deal with it on the institutional structural level, then you could go a long way in not eliminating it, but removing it and making a more balanced system. Because remember, we live in a society that is a caste system, meaning individuals, say, for example, African Americans are born into a caste system because the median income for a black household is $1,700. And in some studies show that for white households, the median income is around $10,000. That's a huge economic disparity. Okay. So keep that in mind. It means that you are 3 or 4 steps behind if you're born as an African American, which sufficiently puts you in a caste system similar to what India had and what Gandhi was fighting. Well, India had and Gandhi should have been fighting to get rid of the caste system, but in some accounts he was actually ignored it. And you know, in fact, we know from history accounts that Gandhi was a racist, and he tried to incite race war against blacks in South Africa. So when I talk about a caste system, I also talked about this. The current system that we live in wants the structure itself. Let's say, for example, if you're opposed to Trump, or you're opposed to you know, any of the Klan leaders, or David Duke or whatever, you can remove these individuals, but the structure which is built upon the foundation of it is racist, will still remain. You know, the laws in place are racist, you know. But this is by design. So what the global elite, what the system wants to do is create factions. And within those factions, it has taskmasters to keep individuals in check. So there's a hierarchy. So like, for example, you may have a group of blacks, and within that group of blacks, you may have a bourgeois group that has more economic advantage. And those bourgeois groups check the poor, impoverished blacks and keep them in check so that the white taskmasters don't have to do that. You know what I mean? So it's a very sophisticated system. So it's akin to what I look at it also as the Native American totem pole, where you have the racial totem pole at the top is whites, and at the bottom you have blacks, and everything in between you have Latino, Native American, Mexican, Asian, things like that. But what the system, the structure does by the global elite, I'm talking about the billionaires who control the banking institutions, they want these factions. First of all, they create the factions by using erroneous names and definitions and labels, like feminists, like liberals, like LGBT. They create these names and they give out resources through government programs supporting one faction over the other. So they may give out, for example, this is just an example, they may give funding for Latinos migrating to this country and allow them to start businesses, but pull away bank loans and things of that nature from African Americans who want to start businesses in their own neighborhoods. And they do this because they want the factions fighting over resources. That's the whole idea. Keep them fighting over resources. Now, why are they doing this? Because in order to control a planet, and there's 2 levels to this, to control a planet, you have to have division. You cannot control a planet that has a consensus of thought and movement. When people are aligned, when they are in agreement, you cannot, you have no way of controlling them because you're outnumbered. It's basically that clear. But when you can break them up into these compartments and cells and factions, as I was saying, and keep the factions fighting against each other by using erroneous names, definitions, and labels, and you always diverting resources to one while neglecting another, pretending that there are not enough resources, then you are creating this grand battle between everyone. And this is what the global elite wants to do. Charlottesville, Virginia, the protest there, mayor, the city, they knew that these white supremacists were coming in. They knew this was going to happen. They knew there was anti-protesters coming in. The media knew this. The media wanted a conflict because that gets the ratings. This was an entirely staged event. And this was played out to create conflict, to keep the conflict going. If you go back in history, you'll see that, you know, the Black Panther Party was infiltrated, the COINTEL program, and it was disbanded. You know, even white supremacist organizations like Klan were infiltrated. So the government had its hand in these things. They know exactly what they're doing. So what you're seeing is played out. If our government really wanted to eliminate racism, they could. If they wanted to stop these white supremacists, they could. You know, so, but they don't, because on a global level, it's better to keep the people divided. And if they're divided, you can control them through the taskmasters and things of that nature. Now, from a priest or a magi or magician, the understanding is, you know, the Bible says if two or more agree, so shall it be. So you know that you are God man, God woman in the Geb, or the physical body. Your consciousness is which is the all-seeing eyes, the symbolism of consciousness. Your consciousness is within the physical being, experiencing fourth dimensional reality. You are projecting outward a hologram so you can interact with it and gain experience, right? We know that's what's going on. We know that the psyche is connected to every other psyche on the planet. So we're all connected through what we call the collective consciousness. This collective consciousness can have information uploaded and downloaded. When you're downloading information, you're pulling it from the Akashic records. When you're uploading it, you're putting in there a software program or a virus. Racism is a virus. So what happened many, many years ago is that our ancestors figured out how to hack the psyche, to put information into the collective consciousness. And Carl Jung did some work on this called archetypes, to put information into the collective consciousness and to control the minds remotely of people. And first and foremost, you control races, groups, you can control men, you can control women, you can control Asians, you can control blacks. We know this has happened, and recent experiments prove this with the Japanese mesquite monkeys called the 100 monkey experiment. We found out that these monkeys had behavior on these islands, and the monkeys in one island were doing the same thing as monkeys on another island. And they had no contact with each other, but they exhibited the same unusual behavior. And we realized that there was a psychic connection going on where behavior was being transferred psychically from species, from these two different islands locations throughout the entire species. Same with humans. We find that culture on the West Coast can transfer to culture on the East Coast without there being any physical contact. Now, the reason why we don't consider this, it seems far-fetched, is because we're based on Cartesian logic, which is the one-to-one relationship of things. We always think that to change things in the world, there has to be a direct intervention. We don't see that there can be a direct route, or indirect route to making changes, meaning that you can change the consciousness of the planet by simply meditating or doing a ritual. You don't have to protest. You don't have to do like Bruce Willis does to fight the bad guys when they have all these machine guns. He goes and gets bigger guns, and then there's a battle. You don't have to do that because the psyche is connected. And in ancient Egypt, one of the things they had was a symbolism of Nekabet and Wajet. Nekabet and Wajet were psychic influences. And the priests of Egypt were very keen and knowledgeable on attacking you psychically, getting into the mind and influencing your thoughts. Now, it's not like, you know, you see in these stage shows like hypnotism that can make you do all this. It's not like that. It is more subtle of an influence that kind of whispers in your ear and gives you thoughts and ideas on what to do, because the thoughts that you have are not your own. Thoughts are transferable. You pick up on energy vibrations and thoughts. CIA has been doing experiments with this. They know this is a fact, that thoughts can be transferred or interpreted by computer simply through brain signatures and vibrations. They can be reinterpreted into actually letters and words, okay? So we're living in a Western society that is predominantly left brain. What is left brain? Left brain sees things in a very concrete, solidified way. It uses labels, definitions, terms, It separates. This is what we're living in, where the reason why you have individuals who are white supremacist and racist is because they're polarized in left brain thinking, because all they can see is the external thing. They cannot see the internal. So there's three. So we know that Western man has a concrete, he's concrete in his thought process. And that is a problem because the way you perceive the world has to be through the filters, the brain, left brain, right brain. And if these filters are not all working properly and integrated, you're going to have a very skewed perspective on what you see and how you perceive the world. And that will then shape your reality, and you will create that reality for yourself. So if I'm perceiving things only out my left brain, I will not be able to see that there could be a unified theory, or that all people are connected through what we call the collective consciousness, you know? And that's the problem, where we've caught ourselves into what we call the Hegelian dialectic, where you see everything in terms of good, bad, darkness, light, good force, bad force, you know, only male, you know, like male opposing female. And these are opposing forces. We don't see them as complementary, but they are diametrically opposed to each other. And so to go into this whole idea where what we've got ourselves into a racism, I want you to understand, now I've covered left brain and right brain. Right brain cultures were predominantly cultures of color, of melanated pigmentation. So right brain cultures were, you can see them in some Asian cultures, you can see them in some Mexican cultures, you can see them in African cultures, because the right brain is very integrated. It integrates with the left brain to create a whole brain perspective. And when you're thinking using the whole brain, your perspective of the universe and everything becomes holistic. All right. Now, there are three modes of thinking. There is analysis, which separates things through abstractions. There is synthesis, which ties things that may seem unrelated through abstractions. And then you have your congregative thinking, which combines things based on external components, you know. The problem that we have that exists in the world today is that we are predominantly caught up in congregative thinking, meaning we are combining things based on external components. So we'll look and say, oh, all white people, okay, all you people belong in this section, we congregate all white people there. Oh, you're black, oh, you stay in black section here, and you're Asian over there. That's that congregative combining things based on external components. What we need to get through is the process of synthesis, which is tying things tying externally unrelated things through abstractions. Now, what do I mean by that? I may say, okay, you're black, you're white, but in reality, you are consciousness. And not only that, you are collective consciousness. You're only one consciousness. You're not individual consciousness. So you are together because you are God men. Does that make sense? Because in the traditional ancient cultures, they looked at things, or their perspective was synthesis. So they did see white, black, but they saw, oh, God man, God woman, collective consciousness. Your consciousness is my consciousness. What I do to you, I do to myself. That's synthesis thinking. That is how we perceive the world in ancient cultures. This is how the pyramids were built. This is how the great wonders of the world were created, through understanding that there is an ecology, an ecosystem, that everything has a place. And by removing one thing, you create an imbalance and the structure collapses. But when you're caught up in this congregative thinking, where you're combining things based on external things, you can't see the abstractions that exist on the inside, and therefore you'll never understand that there is an inherent connection between things. Fish are in a tank, they're in water. Fish may not understand that there's water there. They know they're in something, right? You remove the water, they die, okay? If one fish, for hypothetical, just say example, is polluting the water, it will affect other fish. That is the indirect relationship. Again, we're caught up in this Cartesian logic where it's a one-to-one correlation. That, again, is a property of the left brain, because the left brain thinks linearly. It sees things in a straight line, sees things like, oh, you're a bad guy, you have guns, let me get guns, and let's fight out using guns. And if you know the story of Haru and Set, when Haru fought Set in a stalemate all the time. It wasn't until he went to Tahuti, the higher mind, or the intuitive right brain, he was able to gain far-reaching wisdom that allowed him to defeat Set. And the most important thing that he understood was Set was really not his enemy. Set was a natural component of the whole, which helped Haru to spiritually grow and to reach a higher level. It's like alchemy, starting from the low level to go to a higher level of understanding that we all are connected, and that you are me. You are me. I'm speaking to myself when I talk to you because it's the same consciousness. Does that make sense? And we know the left brain connects us here to what we call this fourth dimensional plane of reality, where the right brain is the gateway into nonlinear space time, or it's non-locality. So there actually is no fixed point in space and time when you go into the inner planes through the right brain, which is your bridge and connection or stargate to that. Now let's go deeper into this. And I've talked about the right brain and the hemispheres of brains as your filter and how you process information. And if you're polarized in one aspect, you can't see correctly. And this is what we're dealing with when we see that we have these psychopaths who are ruling the planet, and we have these white supremacists because they're so polarized in that left brain, one-way concrete thinking, congregative thinking, combining things based on externals. They can't really see who their brothers and sisters really are. They don't understand that there is only consciousness that is connected, and the harm that they're doing to others, it's really being done to themselves. And it's bringing an imbalance to the whole superstructure, which will collapse. Or Ma'at will send Haruka Udi in to bring it back into balance, okay? Now, Haru, we talk about Haru. Now, Haru is a process of thinking there too. Haru is circumspection, meaning Haru's looking at all aspects, the whole, making the consideration, looking at every aspect before initiating anything. And that circumspection is very, very important. This all traces back to ancient culture, because in ancient culture times, we didn't talk about left brain, right brain. We talked through metaphors. We looked at the universe. We looked at the world around us, Geb, to see how we could use that as an analogy. We use things as, this is analogous to this, and that is analogous to this. That is a way of the right brain tying things together, or bringing things together, or seeing deeper levels to something. So back then, we functioned among what we called as the cults. And there were four main cults. There was the moon cult, or the lunar cult, the solar cult, the sun, the stellar cult, and the Satyrian cult, or cult of Saturn. Now, the two cults that we need to really be mindful of is probably the moon cult and the lunar cult, or the solar cult, because we moved the timeline. The space-time continuum was changed because we were students or practitioners of the stellar and the lunar cults, which was right brain, which was the subconsciousness. But those who wanted to take control of the planet saw an opportunity there to suppress occult knowledge, occult wisdom, and the chief architects of that were the moon, the lunar, and the stellar cult. Sorry, I hope I didn't say solar, because the moon, lunar cult, and the stellar cults. All right. Stellar cult meaning stars, understanding the Bible is based on astrotheology. All right. So let me just make sure I say this right. I don't want to get it confused again. We're talking about the lunar and the stellar cults. Those are the two cults that were chiefly responsible for bringing civilization into existence. Those are the two cults that dealt with the right integrated brain thinking, or the subconsciousness, exploring the deep realms of dimensions in the consciousness, the right brain, which is the gateway to different levels of dimensions and parallel universes. But there was a plan concocted to take over the planet and suppress occult knowledge. And when that happened, we moved from the lunar and stellar cults to the solar cults, or the left brain. All right. So, which is why you'll find, I said the Bible is based on astrotheology, which is fine. You'll see in the Bible analogies or metaphors saying the Son of God, the Son. This is, again, leading to the idea of left brain, external thinking over internal thinking, intuition, things of that nature. And the Satyrian Saturn cult goes into a lot of different things. I don't have time to explore that right now. All right. So we've talked a lot about all of this. All right. Now, what I want you to understand is the problem that we've got ourselves into is concrete thinking. All right. That left brain thinking, where we are trying to personify, put into a concrete terms, the enemy. We're saying that the enemy are these white supremacists. We're saying that the enemy is President Trump. We're saying that the enemy is David Duke or the head of the Klan or Hitler. No, those are not the enemy. Those are the effects or symptoms of a greater cause. What we have to start dealing with is the frame of mind. You see, the psyche, the collective consciousness has been hacked. A virus has been uploaded into the collective consciousness. That virus is racism. That virus is left brain segregative thinking. And it's affecting us all, from the media, educational institutions to marketing. We are so trapped in left brain thinking. And what is left brain thinking? We always have this idea of this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. No, everything complements one another. Every part is necessary for the functioning of the whole. So we have to stop thinking in terms of those contradictions. And we have to start thinking in terms of concrete. You know, you could remove the white supremacists. You could remove the President David Duke. You can remove these figureheads, but the virus that is floating around in the higher levels of our psyche will take root again and create another person. So we have to understand we're not fighting against an individual or individuals within an organization. We are fighting against a synthetic man-made virus that has been uploaded like software, an operating system, 3.0 or whatever, into our psyche, and it's controlling and influencing the way we are thinking. They have done studies with young white children, and they put dolls there, and they put a black doll, put a white doll, young white children. And they said, what child looks bad? And they always pointed to the black doll. These children are too young to have been influenced by the institutions, the media and all that. They are getting this through a psychic connection. They're plugged into the matrix, and the matrix is downloading to them these thoughts and these ideas, because collectively, like the Japanese mesquite monkeys and the 100 monkey principle, we are all collectively connected and receiving information. All right. And this information is through the psyche, where it's emotional, where it's thoughts, and it's a whole lot of stuff. I don't have time to go into that, but understand that we cannot end this by continually personifying evil. It doesn't work that way, because the minute we remove the individual, another one will just take its place. Remember the ancient stories? What is it? The Hydra, the multi-headed serpent, how every time the warrior would cut one head of the serpent off, another would grow. So he got nowhere. And this is what you're going to do. You're going to cut off the head, and only another one will come or grow out and replace it. And this is what the whole symbolism of the ancient Egyptian story of Osiris Set was about, where Haru kept battling Set. It was a stalemate. He got nowhere. We have to understand occult powers. We have to tune into higher knowledge to beat this thing. You're not going to end racism by simply changing the CEO of a company, to protesting, to getting rid of the head of a state, the head of the mayor of a city. It doesn't work that way. You're fighting, number one, you're fighting a virus in the psychic realm, and you're also fighting institutions and structures. This is not an individual battle or individuals. You know, I think the battle talked about we fight not against flesh, you know, so but principles and principalities or whatever. So Start looking deeper. And the reason that we don't see this is because we're trapped, again, in left brain concrete thinking, to where we're always looking for the villain as a person or thing. You know, we're never saying I'm fighting against an ideology, you know. And this was, I did a video on this on that movie Wonder Woman, which you've got to check it out, with Gal Gadot. And it beautifully explained this when she realized that when she was fighting Ares, which she thought was the villain, and by killing Ares, she thought would end war. And Steve Trevor told her, you're not fighting one person, you're fighting an ideology, a thought process, because we're all culpable. We're all responsible for this. So yes, you can fight Ares, you can get rid of him, but evil will still exist and wars will still go on unless we deal with the way people are thinking and change their hearts and their minds, their perspective. In this case, purging that virus from the psychic realm. We've got to purge that virus. It's been uploaded there. And that's the nature of social engineering. Social engineering is not just about, you know, creating these marketing campaigns or creating the way people live in neighborhoods or how they relate to each other. Social engineering is also exploring the realms and the depths of the psychic mind and in influencing them. And if you've done any real research, you'll know that our government has done all kinds of tests using drugs, using sensory deprivation chambers, using the most advanced equipment to probe the depths of the mind and to control and manipulate people remotely. They've even done experiments into remote viewing. They're still doing this. So what I'm saying to you is that we don't understand on these black ops projects how advanced and how far they have gone. And I put forth to you that they have been successful and they have gone to the umpteenth degree, which is the whole thing that we have now, this synthetic thing, this virus called racism that they've implanted in our psyche, which again, I said is racism is a smokescreen. What's really going on is how we're polarized in one type of thinking to where we only see good and evil. We see things not as complementary, but diametrically opposed to each other. And we have to understand that we just can't go eliminating our enemies or what we perceive to be our enemies because they're really us. That there's a place for everything in its place. And all these components, when they do the wrong thing, it's only that they're going out of balance and there's something in them that needs to be fulfilled. So what do? We bring them back into balance, give them the thing that they're looking to feel fulfilled, and harmony will reign. And it's not going to reign by battling, fighting, protesting, terrorism acts. It's not going to work. Those things don't work. When you start your meditation, when you start going to inward, to higher dimensions and communicating with astral spirits and things of that nature to help you and assist you to change people's minds and attitudes, that's where the progress is. That's where you deal with things that are taking root and are hardcore. You deal with them on a psychic collective consciousness level. Because when you see the masses operating in a certain way, it's very difficult to change the masses. And this thing, racism, has affected the masses. And many people who don't think they're racist are. They are. Because we only see racism in a certain way. It's like, well, if you're a neo-Nazi or white supremacist, you're racist. But an average Joe, no, I can't be racist. Well, no, you are. You're not picking up on it, you know. And there's, like I said before, you know, a lot of it comes in the form of microaggressions that people experience in corporate America. People experience riding the subway, riding a bus, walking down the street, interacting with friends they thought were friends, but will slip up and say something that's very insensitive or treat them a certain way. This is because you can't be not part of the whole. You are in the whole and you're part of the whole. Thoughts are transferable. You're going to pick up on that. You have an institution, a society that's built upon elevating the ego of white males and white females and devaluing the lives of people of color. You can't help it. The media is constructed in such a way as to continually prop up, for example, white women as a standard of beauty. You can't get out of that. It's affecting your psychology. It's affecting your psyche. And though you may say it doesn't affect me, or I'm not racist, or I'm not anti-Semitic, the thoughts are there in your, what we call your shadow self. It's there. In the tarot card, there is the tarot, there's the moon card. The moon card is a symbol of those things that are trapped within you that come out with when the full moon hits, which is where we get the stories of the werewolf. But really, it symbolizes the deep, dark emotions and secrets you keep down that come from within when there's a full moon, because your body's mostly water, and we know the moon has an effect on the tides. So all of these things and the water within you, our ancestors use the water as a metaphor for, you know, that which is sways, it's influence, it's fluid, you know, and it's not static or hardcore. So there is a way to beat this thing, to cure the planet of this thing called racism. But the only way we're going to do this is by a collective effort, or by a high initiated priest who can work the rituals, work the magic, to go into the collective consciousness and to upload or a new program or purge the virus from the psyche that was put in there by the global elite. And they did this many years ago because they created racism for a specific purpose. And I talked about dividing the planet and creating conflict so they can control the planet. But anyway, I've given you a lot of good secrets here about what's going on in the planet. Please take this information, study it, watch this video several times to digest it, to understand it, meditate on it, and you'll get more insight as to what I'm talking about. I am just scratching the surface of all of this. And our ancestors, the great shaman, priests, priestesses, were the masters of all this information, and it was stolen from them by a secret organization which bent on controlling the planet. Now they're using these occult powers to control and dominate the masses and push us in a direction of a very dark future. So if you've liked this video, please subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and until my next broadcast, this has been Kasankma Keperu. Wish you peace, blessings, and Amin Ra.